Good afternoon and welcome to our presentation, Integrated Business Planning, the Next Generation of Sales and Operations Planning. My name is Adrienne Selko and I'm the Senior Editor for Industry Week, which is producing this event. Today's webinar is sponsored by Demand Solutions. During today's webinar, you'll learn step-by-step actions to advance your supply chain maturity. At Industry Week, our mission is to connect manufacturing decision makers to share ideas and tools that inspire action. We strive to provide information that helps you make better decisions to achieve your goals. Today's webinar brings together members of the manufacturing community to discuss strategic and operational issues. As part of this webinar, we'll have a live Q&A session using questions submitted by you, our audience. Our speaker today will address as many questions as he can during the last portion of the event. However, there's no need to wait to the end to ask it. Just submit your questions throughout the webinar, type it into the Ask Question box, and hit the Submit button. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available for you to view. We encourage you to direct coworkers to the recorded presentation, and you'll receive an email with a link to the on-demand version in a few days. The recording will also be available on our industryweek.com website in our webinars area. We ask that you please disable your pop-up blockers during this event. If you're using Internet Explorer, you can disable the pop-up blocker by going into the Tools menu, clicking Internet Options, then choosing the Privacy tab at the top. If for some reason the presenter slides are not advancing or you're having problems with audio, press the F5 key at the top of the keyboard and this will refresh the webinar console. To adjust the volume, look for the volume control widget in the lower corner of your screen. You may also need to adjust the master volume of your computer system. You'll also see several buttons. A launch survey button will bring up a feedback form, which you'd like you to complete at the conclusion. You'll see a full screen mode button, which will enlarge the webinar player. And you'll also see the download slides button. This links to a PDF of the presenter's slides so you can save or present the slides. And finally, the Help button offers a series of troubleshooting tips. I'd like to welcome our speaker, Bill Harrison, who is President of Demand Solutions. Bill's career started on the loading dock of True Value Hardware more than 35 years ago, and since then he's worked in almost every aspect of supply chain management. Today, Bill is President of Demand Solutions, where he is responsible for the company's corporate strategy and direction, as well as its operations, including development, sales, marketing, services, customer program, alliances, and channels. Prior to Demand Solutions, Bill served as Chief Operating Officer of Atrion Clearcloth, a global supply chain corporation, where he was instrumental in defining the company's product strategy, increasing sales, rationalizing the cost, and driving profitability. We'd like to welcome Bill.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm going to try and take a topic that is complex and make it as simple as I can, really. So we're going to start just by looking at sales and operations planning. As we said that, this is the next evolution, the next stage. Demand Solutions was actually a pioneer in the sales and operations platform. We were the first company to come out with a dedicated application only to sales and operations planning. And while we haven't come out per se up until now with the integrated business planning process, is because it's more than just a data warehouse. It's more than screen scrape. It's more than business intelligence. It's a lot more to it. And if you look at the definition of S&OP, it was a process that was designed to really work within your four walls. It was to take the information and trying to optimize your demand and supply, but it was more at a strategic level. And what has happened over the years, with the primary focus being just on future actions and anticipated results, it really didn't get where we needed it to be, and that was to run an integrated business plan. Now, part of the reason for that isn't that none of us wanted to. We've all talked about it over the years, but really what had to happen is technology had to catch up to us. So if we go and we take a look at integrated business planning, the big difference between integrated business planning and S&OP is it breaks down the four walls of the business. It includes customers, partners, key stakeholders, our suppliers, and it brings the financial plan into it. And now we're actually going through and evaluating and revising in a real-time, based on demand, supply, portfolio, strategic projects, and the resulting financial plans. So all of that is looped together. And this is done over a 24-month horizon, but it's done every month, and the key part is we have to measure as we go. And the trick to this isn't just changing the acronym from S&OP to IBP. It's a lot more complex and a lot more detailed than that. Now, one of the first things that happens, and one of the reasons people go to an integrated business platform, is because there's a huge savings to their organization, and not just financial. It's resources. It's better for the operations. You manage things. So I've got a poll up here, and what I want to ask is if you've identified an S&OP or an IBP process that you follow every month. So if people could just go through and check, and if you've done an IBP, if you have the IBP process, or if you have an S&OP process, or if you don't have either, if you wouldn't mind just checking the box, and I'll give a couple seconds here to get the results, and we'll see where it goes. I guess I should do the Jeopardy sound here. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next screen. And if we look at that, look at these numbers. 51% say, yes, we have an S&OP process. 44% have no process at all. And only 5% really do integrated business planning. And it's not a surprising number. And to be quite honest, even a lot of people that do S&OP, there's a lot of factors that really are detrimental to their success. And we're going to talk about some of that here. But first, let's look at what the opportunities are. If you go to ScoreMark, which is supplychain.org, what they did is they did an analysis and they surveyed their members, of which we're one, and they went through and they broke the world down into 6 different industries. They did CPG, electronics, industrial products, petrochemical, retail, wholesale, and then the service sector. And then they ask, what are your costs of your supply chain per $1,000 in revenue? And when you look at that cost, it's distribution cost, it's obsolescence cost, it's personnel, it's procurement, all of those factors. And if you take the median range where the customers were in the center and you look at your industry there, you can see. So from a CPG point of view, it's about 8%. It's 7% in electronics, industrial products, 9%. And up to the service sector, it's almost 17%. So, and that's the people that are at the median level. And once again, it correlates. If you go back to that previous slide, in the survey, 51% of the people here have no process, and this includes people at all levels of maturity. So that's kind of the median range. So, one of the things to think about as a group and as a company is, do you know these costs? And I will ask for that information later today. So, let's take a look at Dilbert here. Is this you? There's so much redundancy going on in organizations. There's so many, little silos going on that sometimes a lot of people don't know what the next people are doing. And as you mentioned in my bio, I started my career with a multi-billion-dollar company. I joined it when it was $400 million, spent 17 years with it, and I went from a very horizontal, flat organization to one where everybody had a little box, and nobody really stepped outside their box. Because if you did, there was always somebody there with a rolled-up newspaper to whack you in the nose to tell you to get back into it. And that's what has happened predominantly in business. And a lot of people think S&OP and even IBP is just the supply chain, and it's not. It goes across the enterprise. So, if we look at what happens today in a traditional supply chain, and I'll even venture to say based on the 51% of the people that responded they don't have anything, you have a demand issue arise, it goes to the demand side. You have a product or supply side, it goes to their respective products. If you have a reconciliation review somewhere, it goes to there. But each one of these has to get resolved, come back. Then it goes to the next group, resolve, come back, and on and on and on. And even if you're very good and you've got a proactive means of identifying and finding a problem, by the time you get around to resolving it, it takes days and sometimes even weeks. And guess what? The problem occurred even though your best interest said we identified it earlier, but we don't have that lines of communication. And then to compound it even more, once it gets to each of those, you've got these departmental silos. It might have to go to 4 people within that. So, you've got all this back and forth, and there's really been no way. I mean, if you think back, we all had collaboration, some form. It could be as simple as transmitting over a modem, which I'll talk about later, versus EDI, versus technology, but it's always been one-to-one. And now what the world demands and what IBP really needs is a many-to-many. And that's what we call the social supply chain. And it's where you're solving problems, you're solving product issues, marketing issues, demand, supply, and customers, and you're doing it simultaneously. And you do that with a lot of various tools, and that's where I mentioned earlier, it took a while for the technology to catch up. And it's also, it always depended on the device. Well, nowadays, there's social collaboration tools such as Yammer, such as Salesforce.com with their chatter. And then you have your devices. People look at it on a phone. They look at it on a tablet. They look at it on a PC. So there's many different ways to get to the information now through many different channels, and it allows you to link with people real time, regardless of where they are. And in a case of Yammer, which is one that we've integrated to, we've also integrated to Salesforce, but in the case of Yammer, there's 28 different languages involved, so I can type something in English and communicate with somebody in China or Japan who doesn't read or write English using their translator. It's not the most perfect, but it works. We can communicate, we can read, and we can do it. I can do it from home from my tablet. I can do it from my phone if they're at work or vice versa. And it really does a complete 360 around the globe and gets information. And when you think about what's happened in the information background over the years, with the old traditional email or phone calls, we're 13 hours from China. So I have an issue, I place an email or I place a call. Guess what? At 7 o'clock in the morning, it's 8 o'clock at night to them. By the time they get around to getting it, it's the next morning for them. It's our night. They answer, but they may not answer. They may have another question, so they shoot me another question. I don't see it till the next day. And you see where this is going. It's back and back, and it takes 3 days to answer a simple question sometimes because you can't even call them. So with the social world and this instant-on world that we're living in now, you really need to be social in your supply chain to take advantage of integrated business planning. So now if we look at what happens, and if any of you are football fans, you'll probably remember in Stanford and their marching band in 2010, they got tripped up and they fell. They weren't coordinated. It's a lot of noise. But if you look at what happens with real integration, what you end up with is music. You end up with an orchestra playing. And that's where we want to be. We want to take the noise out of our supply chain, and we want to get to the point where we can run our business the way it's supposed to be ran. Not just a process, but it has to be for the benefit of the business, not the benefit of a process. And that's the other thing that happens sometimes. So if we look, and this is how we define the integrated business planning model, we've broken it down into 5 stages. There's sensing, there's shaping, there's collaboration, there's integration, and there's orchestration. And I can make it real simple. We're going to build a demand plan. We're going to make sure you can get it. We're going to talk to your customers and your suppliers. We're going to match it to your business plan, and then we're going to execute, monitor, measure, adapt, and we're going to repeat that monthly. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Well, it's really a lot more than that. So we're going to actually break each of these components down, each of these stages down, and we're going to talk in detail about them. The first one we're going to talk about is sense. And it's sense, it could be a lot of things. It could be common sense. But if you go back even to Ollie White, back in the 80s when they started the whole S&OP process, it was a process. And then it evolved over the years where to have the process, the first thing you have to have is a demand plan. So everybody went out and bought forecasting systems. And there's a lot of players in the industry that have these forecasting systems. So now I've got a number. And somewhere in this frame, you had a demand planner that was responsible for it. And everybody's throwing stuff in, everybody's critiquing, everybody's criticizing. And the one person that was responsible is somebody that did nothing but crunch numbers. And it really didn't work well. So what's had to happen over the years is sensing, and this demand plan is so much more than demand planning now. It's much more strategic. It'll typically be at the family or the subfamily level with a minimum of 18 to 24 months future visibility. And why 18 to 24 months? It's because over the years, we've gone from a local to a global supply chain. Back in the 80s, I remember Donald Bowersox, a professor at Michigan State. He came out and said, during our life, the supply chain is going to go from the ground to the consumer in less than 7 days. And many companies have done that. Fresh Express, Taylor Fresh Farms, Driscoll Strawberries. You take, very perishable items, and that happened because it had to. Or products like bottled water where they're bottled locally because you can't move that all across the country. It's too expensive. That's why Evian costs so much. That's why, Fiji costs so much because it's getting moved all over the world. So what Sense has had to evolve into is much more than just a demand plan. It's the first part. And what happens is at the first of every month, you're going to post your actuals, you're going to run your strategic forecast, and you're going to check for forecast accuracy, customer service levels, inventory levels, and the planners are going to go out and they're really going to evaluate the performance of the statistical tool. But where Sense really comes into play now is it becomes interdisciplinary. And what I mean is you've got one person has to be in charge of this. And that person is either going to be the vice president of sales or the vice president of supply chain. Can't have two. There's one person in charge. But you also need several participants to be part of this now. It's not just the demand planner anymore. So you need the supply chain group, the analyst, the planner. You need sales. They've got to be an intricate part of this. You've got product management. What products are we introducing? What products are we discontinuing? Do we have an engineering change? Do we have a quality problem somewhere? Do we have a labeling change? All of those need to be brought to the focus to everybody early on in the process. And then last but not least is marketing, because marketing's planning on promotions. They're promoting things, or they have special things going on with certain customers out there. And we all know we all have our favorite customers. So sensing becomes so much more than just doing a demand plan anymore. And you have to involve many people across the organization to come up with a number that everybody can agree on. And it's not the one number plan that everybody talks about. That's great. You've got a number now. And that's what S&OP did. We got a number. Let's go through the supply. Well, now we have to shape that number. And by shape is we have to go out, and once again, we've got to look across our entire network again. We got to look to production. We have to do a rough cut capacity plan. We got to make sure that what we're planning 6 months, 8 months in advance, we even have the capacity. We may have the capacity if we add another shift, but production doesn't have the authority to do that. So you have to take those notes along the way as we go through the process and we get higher up the food chain. Once again, we've got to bring other people in to get their approval. And at the end of the shaping, we've had a demand plan in place from before, and now we have a supply plan in place. But let's talk about the supply review meeting a little bit. Once again, this is led by either VP of Supply Chain or the VP of Ops. Sales has been involved. We've got a number, or supply chain, whichever your company decides is the right one for you, because that's individualized based on the company. Once again, you've got supply chain management as part of this group, but you also now have to introduce procurement. You have to introduce production, and you've got to bring in your logistics team. Because while I may be able to make it at this plant, that's not the normal plant that ships it to this warehouse. Maybe I have to get it from another plant. If I'm buying, I can't get it from my supplier. Maybe I have to go to an alternative supplier to get this. Maybe we don't have the raw material, so procurement needs to be involved. We need more materials, or we need more packaging. And when you start looking at all the demand requirements and the timing of those, and you time phase this, you evaluate the rough cut plans for critical resources, shutdowns. You're looking at all the options of make versus buy. You're dealing with the alternatives for addressing the supply. And then you have to resolve there. And then at the very end of all that, there are sometimes it's just decisions that had to be made that this group cannot do. And you have to go in and get the next level up. So we go through this, and if you look, now I'm talking about a local and or a regional supply chain, because to a lot of companies, this is IBP. This is what they need. You could have a division, you could have a small company, everybody's right there, they're all part of this. They don't need a lot of the other stuff in their business model the way it is today. In the future they will, but they've got to get really good here. They may not have the manpower to do this. They may not have the process in place. They may not even know how to begin. But you know what? Every supply chain needs to optimize their supply and their demand regardless. So at a local level, and then you start looking and, company size, area of operations, products and services provided, your trading partners and customers. The benefits of collaboration, business intelligence, and data visualization can be realized no matter what the size, but for some it stops here, and that's okay. We're not saying that, you've got to come in and you've got to buy this big process and buy into this concept and buy all these tools and do all this stuff. It's great if you can, but it's not always necessary. And that's where I think we differ from others, because at the end of the day, it's what is the best for your business, not the best for the process, as I said earlier. But now, for those who do want to go forward, we look to collaborate. And collaborate, that's just been so many things. So many things with so many people. But really, I'm taking my supply and my demand plan now, and I'm going to collaborate with all the key stakeholders, both inside and outside the enterprise. And at this stage, technology is a must anymore. And in a way, technology always has been a must. But what you're doing now is you're getting departmental coordination, and you're collaborating not just inside, but you're collaborating outside. So if we take a look, and I want to talk a little bit about this collaboration, because I have a lot of history with this. I've been in this business a long time, and I can remember years ago, and some of you in this room probably won't even know what I'm talking about, but an old IBM XT with a 1200 baud modem. Because I remember my days at True Value dialing into Yellow and Consolidated Freightways into their mainframe with a modem, downloading an ASCII file, and then I could print that ASCII file on green bar paper on my dot matrix printer, and I had this little acetate template that I would hold over it and go over it, and it would parse that information for me so I could determine where a PO was or where an order was, in the supply chain. And something? At the time, that was light years ahead of where we really needed to be. And then we've evolved. We went to EDI, and that was great. ANSI came along. We've got standards now. There's tools like Sterling. We can share a forecast with an 830. We can share POs and PO receipts, 850, 855, 857. And then we went to web-based applications. Now I can put my information out on a portal, and my customers can go in and look at it, and they can add their forecast. All of those were great solutions. But you know what those were? Those go back to that one-to-one. They weren't one-to-many. One person at a time. And then somewhere I'd have to tabulate all that information, and I'd have to pull it all together, and then I have to send it to somebody else. And it was usually done via spreadsheets. And every time you introduce another layer and you introduce another form that has to be filled out by somebody, what you're introducing is more and more error. So with this new always-on culture and this device-independent social collaboration that exists today, it just really allows you, and I'll use Yammer as an example. I can go into Yammer, I can log in, I can set up a network, independent network for each supplier. I can set one up for each customer. I can be working within the application, and I can have something I can, basically push a button and push it out to them. I can see who's online because it's all lit up. I can instantly IM them, and I can solve a problem real time now. And that type of technology has never been together in the past for people to do. We all claim we had this great collaboration tool, and we did, but it took the power of or the Internet, to really get it there. So now we're bringing in information from our customers, our key trading partners real time. We can truly optimize supply with demand because our customers can see it, we can see theirs, we can enter that in. And then once we have that plan, we can collaborate with our suppliers again, and we can do that simultaneously, especially for key customers, and make sure that they're going to have the ability to get it to us. And if nothing else, they can see where we're going in 4 months or 3 months or 5 months. And it goes back to that independent versus global supply chain. It used to be years ago when I was working in industry, running planning with 54 planners, we used to say, we don't care what the lead time is as long as it's consistent. Give me a 10-day lead time every time and I'm okay. Well, lead time variability is one of the biggest problems with supply chain now because not everything's coming from the Northeast or the Southwest. It's coming from the Southwest Asia. It's coming from the East. It's coming from Eastern Russia or Eastern Europe or Western Europe, or it's coming from South America, and it's coming from all these places. And the boats can be on the water, and now all of a sudden my lead time isn't 2 weeks, it isn't 10 days, it's 3 months, it's 4 months, it's 5 months. So, our suppliers need greater visibility because by the time they can produce it and make sure they have the raw materials and get that boat on the water and get it to us, too many things can happen, especially when you have engineering problems or engineering changes that you've identified earlier. Think about how key that is. You identify, and I can give you an example of one of our customers I was at, and they make contact lenses. We sat down with them, and they're like, well, we do this great forecast every month, and then we publish it, and we have an S&OP meeting with our executives, and we go, here's the PowerPoints we use. And I'm like, well, that's great, but what happens if you change something in the executive meeting? Well, that's our problem. It didn't get done, and last month we made 100,000 contacts we didn't need of this one particular one because the one customer that bought that left us, and no one ever communicated that plan back to manufacturing. And that's what happens. You got to close that loop. And that's where we get into the next stage, which is simply integrate. And integrate means so much more than just integrating the plans. It's two things. It's technology. As I mentioned before, you have to have a strong technology base. I need a strong technology to put it together. But then once I have that technology in place, now the real challenge comes into play because now I have to integrate all those plans and I have to marry that to my financial plan. And I have to be able to do that in a day or two. So by the time I'm done with this, I've got my demand plan, my department coordination, supply. Now I've got a single agreed plan that syncs with the financial responsibilities that we have as a company because the CFO is who is going to lead this group. And it has to be the CFO or the controller of an organization because now what you're doing, you're pulling in all the key stakeholders, not just one department. It's a cross-functional. It has to be by senior management. You're going to review those numbers. First thing is you're going to compare your performance metrics to the previous month. And you're going to make sure it's like, okay, what did we miss? How did we miss it? Do a root cause analysis. Then we're going to go do a product family review. We don't have to get down to the details. As a matter of fact, you'll never get down to that level of detail. But you're going to look at revenue versus budget. You're going to look at cost of goods sold versus budget, margin versus budget. You've got dashboards, return good authorizations, revenues, cost of goods, margin, customer grouping, regional grouping. But what you're doing with how these groupings run, and it's really dependent on your business, how you run your business, is you're reviewing the financial impact through a series of scenarios and making changes. Because you could come in and say, here's everything. Production can make it. Our suppliers have it. Customers agree with the forecast. You get in, finance says, that's great, but we don't have the money. We're out. Our line of credit's down. Or, okay, that's great, but I've got to go get with the banks because we're going to need to increase our line of credit to do this. Or, okay, this is great, but we're 5% off our plan for the year. Or we're 20% over. What does that mean for headcount? What does that mean for labor? What does that mean for production? And then, of course, this is where you come in and you have to start resolving a lot of those other issues. So, customer changes. All of a sudden you've got new business. You lose key customers. The impact of promotions. All of this comes out. You're simulating the impacts of these things happening. And from that, you end up now with an optimized plan. And now you go into the executive meeting. The executive meeting is led by one person only. It has to be the CEO. And all key stakeholders, once again, are involved, and you're reviewing the plan with them. Like I said in my example earlier, that one customer in the contact lenses. Yeah, they did everything right. They got to this level, they identified it, but they didn't communicate it back. So now within the IBP Executive Meeting, you're reviewing the integrated plan. You're reviewing the supply metrics from the previous month so that the CEO and the C-level management is informed of how we're doing on-time delivery, our supplier performance, our ship plan performance, inventory turns, accuracy. All that becomes key. Decisions need to get made there. Do we add that other shift? Do we start building inventory early? If we do, we ran through the simulations. We do need to do that. We've got two options. We can start building early, buy the stuff and build it early, or we can work overtime later. Which do you want to do? Because you've frozen us on head count. And we've all heard that over the last 5 years. Then we can finish that root cause analysis. We agree upon a course of action. And the most important part here is we capture the change and we publish the plan. Now, the plan is one thing. It's a plan. It's a series of numbers. And everybody agrees. And now we have to be able to take this plan, and the first thing we have to do when we orchestrate this plan is make sure that we put it in a format that everybody can work off. Production doesn't need to see, the exact supplier where it's coming from. They need to know what they need to produce there. And then they're going to go through and they're going to schedule at the line level. And we've already gone through the scenarios. We know they can do it. They've gotten the okay for the extra shift. Procurement knows we need extra raw materials. We're good to go. We've got global cooperation from all of our trading partners, our customers, and the people all around the world. And now what we have is a responsive supply chain that meets sudden and short-term demand fluctuation. Because this is the problem where S&OP really just didn't cut the paper, if you will. We got the number, we did it, it was too long-term focus. What you have to do is you have to, at this level, you have to have identified all your company metrics, the key metrics you're going to measure against. You're going to operationalize, publish the plan, and then the important part is to have a continuous improvement plan in place. And by continuous improvement, it means that it's not enough now. What happens? I publish this, and once it's published, it's another month before I publish another one. What happens between the time I publish this and the time the next one comes out? Do I do nothing? Because that's what we've kind of done in the past. We all pat ourselves in the back. We walk away. And everybody's saying, great job, we've got this. Then what happens? Hurricane could hit Florida. A tsunami could hit Japan. The stock market could crash. We could have a plane fly into a building. All of these things impact us on a day-to-day basis. The unrest in Ukraine. How many people have offices there? Because we do. What do you think happened to our business with all of this? Nothing. Everything just dried up. And those types of things are happening all over this world, and we are all know when they happen, but what do we do about them? And that's where the continuous improvement comes. And to really do this, we have to be able to not just modify, we have to be able to adapt, and we have to adapt our business. Now, this isn't something you're going in and hopefully spending a lot of time on every day, but if we take a look at an illustrative type schedule for IBP, if you look the first week, and here's an example of a 21-day plan. The first week is just, I got to do the forecast, and that takes a long time if I got a lot of products. I got to go through, I got to look for, spikes in the demand where it came through, spikes in order. We have to do a root cause analysis. We got to clean all that up, and we have to solidify and publish a forecast, a statistical forecast. Once we post that forecast, now the rest of the sensing stage comes in. And if you notice, these boxes are color-coded, and they kind of follow back to our 5 stages. So now within the orange stage, we're going to do a strategic product analysis. We're going to do a strategic demand analysis. And that starts the first day of the second week. That's where marketing comes in, product management, as we talked to. I get that. I have my demand plan. And now I have to send it over, and now the supply side starts to work at it. And remember, a lot of the key people have been involved through this whole process. So a lot of people stick through this, and they're a constant through this whole process for you. I have to do a rough cut demand and supply review. And rough cut can be simple. A good S&OP tool has rough cut capacity planning in it. Or we can go out in ours and we can look 36 months, 48 months. We can put in a rate by month. We can go through and add it in. And if something happens and we see we can't meet capacity, we can start backloading before and figure out what it's going to take to balance it all out so we can do it without overtime. Or we can say add a shift, and we can know and simulate that. But now what we end up with is a strategic supply. This is what people are committed to. Logistics says yes. I may not be able to make it at this plant, but I can make it at another, or we're going to move this customer to this location, this plant this month. Whatever your decisions are, and there can be many, it gets done. Now I get down to the collaboration. And the first thing we have to be able to do there is review our forecast with our customer and key trading partners. And, I don't want to use that term too loosely, because you're not going to go in and talk to every customer. There's no way. There's too many of them. If you go by the Pareto rule, where 80% of your items are, 20% of your items are giving you 80% of your business, it kind of happens that way with your customers as well. So you have to pick your key trading partners, and you have to identify those. And let's take in the retail world, it's obviously Walmart. We all know who that is, because they find you and they beat you up and they batter you around if you don't do things right. So obviously they're going to be high on your list. But all of us have different people that are our key customers. And we want to make sure that we actually collaborate with those. Once I get all of that in and we've got the changes, because they could say, well, you've got us down for X, but we're actually promoting that. So, now we think instead of X, we're going to do X plus 5,000. And we can get that in, we can look, and once again, we have to run through our simulation, even in the collaborate phase, and come back out with a prioritized demand and supply. And once that's done, I have to, basically the suppliers have to be able to review it. And it's not just for this month. Remember, we're talking at this stage, you're talking 6 to 24 months out. And the suppliers can see it. They know what's coming. There's no excuse for them not to have it. You've gotten your input. And now comes where the rubber really hits the road, where you integrate all that together with finance. The box in the purple starts on the Friday of week 2. And by the way, this is a calendar we see most used in most of our customers. It's very similar to this format. You usually have everything wrapped up by the 3rd week, because if you keep going, you don't have time to publish it and people to get ready for it. So now you're doing your financial assessment, you're doing your supply, demand, and financial plan, you're doing your scenarios, you're bringing the executive management team, and then guess what? You get your buy-in. And on Wednesday of the 3rd week, you say, here's our plan. We are set to go. And like I said, that's where S&OP kind of just ended, and it still didn't do the job collaborating it needed to do. So now I have it. I have to operationalize that plan. And operationalize is a lot more than just publishing a plan, right? So I have to be able to get that work done. I give myself a day to do that. Then I distribute that to my stakeholders on that Friday. And we start to proactively execute changes as required the following Monday. And if you look, prior to that 3rd week, there's that red box with the dots in it. That's the prior month's plan. Because if you go to the last one on the proactive executive changes as required and the continuous improvement, that has to happen all the time. Because if you don't have that happen and you wait till the next month, and it goes back to those silos I talked about earlier, you can be all things to all people, have the greatest plan, and then what happens out of that, if you don't get it done right, doesn't matter, because production's still going to make it. Or procurement won't buy the raw material or the packaging you need. Or you're still thinking it's going to be an old product that's engineered one way, and a new one comes in that you didn't plan for, and you make a lot of stuff. Or you had an engineering change, and you've got a couple of ships on the water already because it's coming from Asia, and no one told them, so they keep making it. And now you've got that much more just wasted inventory that you either have to pull back, retool, rebuild a new subassembly. It doesn't matter. There are so many variables, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. These problems exist in our life day in and day out. we are an instant-on world, as I said today. You think back, and like I said, I've been in this business for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of changes. And for people that in my demographic, let's put it, we come in every day, we fire up our computer, and the first thing we do is check our email. The people that I'm hiring now, the kids right out of college, and I say kids, but the people I bring in right out of college or with a few years experience, first thing they do every morning, they check their email and their phones. But they come in the morning, they log into Facebook, they log into LinkedIn, they log into Yammer. The last thing they do is go to email. That's like us mailing a letter. It's snail mail to them. They're more real time, and they're looking in their various devices. And they need something that's going to come out on those various devices. And that's where the technology comes into play. And that's where the continuous improvement comes into play, unless you live in France. Because as we all know after this week, if you live in France, an employer can't communicate with their employees after 6 p.m. So, I guess that's a good thing if you live in France, but, it's not the real world that we live in nowadays. It's instant information at our fingertips. If we're lucky, we get to turn it off when we go on vacation. And I say loosely if we're lucky. But so now we've gone through, we have these 5 phases. We kind of discussed what we're going to do. We've discussed how we're going to do it. We discussed who needs to be involved. And if you look at the Gantt, we've even taken the time to go through and say who heads each of these key functions that you're going to do in the task. So it's great. Let's just go implement it. Well, guess what? There's a lot of things that can cause you to fail here. First, lack of executive ownership. If you don't have an executive owner, and I can tell you because we were the first to have, and we pioneered supply chain management applications, we can give credit to Ollie White because they really started the supply chain, the S&OP process. But Demand Solutions really kind of pioneered the application for it. And we've sold a lot over the years. But what we see is if any piece of our software is going to sit on a shelf, people buy this with the greatest of intentions, and then what happens, they don't have executive management buy-in when they do it. They don't have the process in place. And as we just learned, here we are 30 years after S&OP started, and 51% of the people on this call today don't even have an S&OP process in place. They have nothing in place. You go buy software, it's just shelfware. If you don't have executive buy-in, you're not going anywhere with this. The second thing you have to fight is perception. It's time consuming. There's no way we can get it done. Our people are too busy. We've got too many other things. And you've got too many other things because people are reacting to everything that comes along. And then the other perception is this is just a supply chain issue. It doesn't impact me in marketing. It doesn't impact product management. I tell merchandising. I tell the buyers. They know what's coming. I don't need to get involved and go to all these meetings. Stressing the process adherence over the business value. That's a real big one here. Because people go in and they bring in Ollie White and they bring in people and they bring in consultants, Accenture, they bring in whoever, KPMG, it doesn't matter. And they get this big laborious process. We got to do this and then this and then this and then this. Well, how do you do all that? I mean, that's where technology comes into play. And you need tools like workflow to be able to do that now. And I can assure you not too many supply chain applications have workflow built into them. Overemphasis on the short-term progress. Okay, great, we got our plan, let's just go month to month. Well, once again, it's beyond all that. And then last but not least is you have the lack of an internal champion. And it doesn't have to be the CEO here, but you have to have somebody that owns running the process internally. You have to have that champion. And I can assure you, if you've got any range of problems with any of these 5, you're not going to succeed at doing IBP. You won't succeed at supply chain and S&OP. So with that, why even do this? Why is it important? How does it change your organization? What are the benefits to me as an organization? These are questions you have to ask yourself. So I've got another survey coming up for you here. And it goes back to at the very beginning, I ask you, do you know what your supply chain costs are today? Can you tell me, or can you even tell yourself, what % of revenue goes towards your supply chain? And that, like I said, that's a lot of things: distribution cost, insurance cost, shrinkage, obsolescence, damage, engineering changes, personnel. I mean, one of the things we call is an acquisition cost. What is that? Well, an acquisition cost is, what is it taking labor for my planner or my procurement specialist to go through and look at everything and determine how much I need to order on each item? How many people truly know what their acquisition costs are? And therefore, do they even know what their supply chain costs are today? So, please answer that, and we'll look at the results. I'm running out of time, so let's take a look here. 22% say yes. 77% of people in this phone call today say no, they don't know their supply chain cost. And once again, that's not something that's uncommon. We see it all the time. People don't even know what their landed cost is. And that's where you need the technology today that exists today that you haven't had for a long time. And if we go back in closing, we talk about that slide early on. What are our costs at the median range for a company in certain verticals? What's our cost? And let's look at the leaders of your industry. Let's look at CPG. The median is 8.1%. The leaders are 2.3%. Now, if you take your revenue and you take that 5.8%, 5.78%, and you figure out what that cost is, if you can save half of that, what does it mean to your organization? Same thing going across electronics, industrial products, services, retail, wholesale. The numbers are staggering. And these are not my numbers. These are your peers. These are people in your industry that have done this. And that's what the opportunity is for you. That's what the opportunity for your business is, to really start to look at and start integrated business planning. And you don't have to start and do all of it at once. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you can come to our website. There's a white paper on the start of the S&OP process, and that we worked with Industry Week on. Come back sometime within early May, and we've actually developed a survey and a questionnaire, if you will, not a survey, but more of a comprehensive questionnaire that you can answer, and we'll show you where you are in each of those 5 areas by sensing, shaping, collaborate, integrate, and orchestrating. And then we'll show you where you are on the continuum against not only the leaders, but where you are against the midpoint. Now, once again, some people, it stops at sense, and that's okay. We're not saying you have to do all of this. We're saying to have true integrated business planning, you do. But, start where you need to start. Make sure you get it done and do a good job at each of those 5, and eventually it'll all come together. And if you need help, there's people like us that'll help you, but there's more than just that. So I don't want this to just be a big commercial for us, because there's others that can help you. And with that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Before we go to questions, I just want to ask our audience to please take a few moments to fill out our feedback form. It should already be on the screen, but if you're not seeing it, go ahead and locate the red survey button in the lower right corner of the widget bar, and you can pull the survey up there. The first question is, can you give an example of the change or respond planning with respect to the calendar, and it's on slide 22?
Well, the change and respond, what happens nowadays is everybody will build a set of metrics. I mean, we integrate with several different BI tools where we can have that information available every morning on a web form. We also, as part of our application, we have real-time KPIs. But the KPIs aren't just, okay, I'm 20% here, I'm 30% there. It's also, there's more to it than just a KPI today. And there's information like how's our stockouts every day on A items? How are our stockouts on key customers? So it goes back to, you have to identify those key metrics that's part of the IBP process. And once you've identified what's important for your business and you build the KPIs around it, you have a dashboard that should come in. And like we have workflow built into our application. There are certain criteria that you need to know right then and there. we can send it out text, email, IM. We can notify you real time through Yammer, through your phone, or whatever. So it's a constant monitoring, but there's only certain things. There's certain things that you would define as acceptable. We all have safety stock, so we have plenty of inventory sometimes to cover it. But what happens is when those things fall outside, we have to be able to adapt.
Okay, great. The next question is, do you find that organizations without S&OP today struggle to understand IBP and effectively implement?
No, because IBP is really the next iteration of S&OP. So you don't have to have S&OP to start this, because the beginning piece is really standard S&OP. That's where it all evolved from. It's just that now with the technology that exists today, we can take it a step further. The key thing is you have to build your process. You have to know what it is you're trying to do, and once again, those metrics. If you can't measure, the old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. And when we know people don't even have a way to know what their costs are today, at least 70+% here, until you've got to get a handle on that. Once you have that, building the process becomes much easier, because you've identified what's important in your organization. You've put your KPIs in place. You know what it is you need to do. You've got an avenue to measure those, and the rest really kind of falls into place. So you don't have to have S&OP to go to IBP. It's just the next evolution of it. As I mentioned earlier with demand planning, it used to be you just created a forecast. You didn't include everybody else. That's where IBP kind of comes in. It's S&OP, but now I'm collaborating and I'm doing things in a more real-time environment, and I'm doing it globally with people in different time zones, different languages, different holidays. I mean, think about it. We did a session once in our customer conference on I survived another Chinese New Year. Because if you don't know that that's coming, which I can tell you, we know when Chinese New Year's is every year, because it's on our calendars and we have people that work there. So we better know, because they're going to be off. You need the same thing. Back in my True Value days, every year we poll our suppliers. What summer months are you going to close this year? Because a lot of U.S. manufacturers would shut down the last week of June, first week of July, force vacations for everybody. And we did it by letter. And then S&OP, you're thinking about it. Now I can collaborate real time. That's the evolution. That's where you need to be. It's not any more complex than that. Okay, next question.
Next question is, how would you apply to achieve VMI to improve lead time and value chain inventory?
VMI, it comes in various shapes and sizes now. VMI could be something I'm just managing the inventory, and I ship it, send you a bill, you pay for it, and then I know, because I have visibility, I'm getting your 852s, and I'm pulling all that in, and I'm seeing what the point of sale data is at the door level at each store, and I can see that. So what you have visibility in by doing VMI is, one, what's actually going on a week-to-week basis out there, and you can be very proactive about it. If you store, like with us, we store that information weekly for up to 2 years, so we can kind of look and plan against it as well. And now, once you're controlling that, you control that lead time. But as I mentioned earlier, lead time variability is probably the biggest component of supply chain error anymore. And one of the things that we've added is what we call a predictive supply chain application, or functionality. It's not an application. It's if you get our supply planning, it comes with it, where we store every PO and every receipt. We track it by month, and then we track each month over 3 years. And we can tell you what your lead time is in January versus what it is in July. And when we time phase it, we take lead time variability into it. And that's what you're really trying to get to. It's not necessarily just VMI, and it's not just that one customer. It's every customer. And you have to know that variability. You want to plan based on it. Otherwise, you can go spend $1 million on a multi-echelon inventory optimization system that has 3 PhDs in the background telling you what you need to do. You don't know why, but if you can find a way to solve that problem easily, it'll take care of that problem itself.
The next question is, you mentioned that developing the IBP process takes 3 weeks, but if during that period things occur that can change the initial forecast and demand plan, how do you take that into account? Does that leave you too little time to react?
No, I got this real quick. I mean, one, everybody says, okay, here's my schedule, my demand plan. It's got to be done and posted on this date. And I'm talking fast so I can get through this question. That's great in theory, but the real world says that forecast changes every day, and that's where that integration comes in. And once again, when you start dealing with our IBP process, we have a real-time forecast as it's changing daily, and as I'm going through that, I have my IBP forecast, and I know what the variance is at every product family as I come in every day. I can see that. Once again, I can cue off of it, I can throw it into workflow, and I can get the results. So, it's ironic that something that we see so simply, and I'll close with this. We were the first with an S&OP application. We weren't the first with an IBP, and the reason we weren't first is because everybody else just changed the acronym. We've gone out and we've really worked, and we understood what the market says, and we have things like predictive lead time. We have things like a true real-time plan and social collaboration. And we know what all this is, and from there we can give a good plan for our customers. And they know what they're doing, and they're sharing this information real time, and they're running their business better.
Okay.
Time for one more?
We do have time for one more, the quick one. Do you integrate and or use Rosetta Net Standard?
No, because, once again, as I said earlier, we said that we're application independent anymore. If you go to the iTunes store, you'll see the Demand Solutions iCollaborate app. At the end of May, we publish our application in Salesforce.com. If you've got Yammer, you're using their private network to communicate with people. So, we've taken the approach that, we don't have to be all things to all people. We've taken an approach that we need to be able to work with key partners where it makes sense. And Microsoft owns Yammer, for those of you who don't know who Yammer is, and 85% of Fortune 500 companies in the world use Yammer. How many people have Salesforce.com that their Salesforce is tied into? If you have your forecast there, their salespeople can actually share that forecast and publish it right into our application, to our Salesforce net, our application. And the same with our iTunes iCollaborate. That's real-time web services right in, so your salespeople can be out. If they've got a 4G iPad, they've got a Wi-Fi iPad, they can see their customers, they can see their products, they can see their regions, they can make changes, and I real-time have access to that information. So we took the approach, instead of trying to do a standard, we take the burden on and we write to each different platform so you can use what works for your business.
Okay, great. Thanks. I appreciate it. We've run out of time today. I want to thank you for an excellent webinar. I want to remind our audience that this webinar will be available on the industryweek.com website in the next few days. Feel free to log in and view it again, or to encourage your colleagues to view it. Also look for a follow-up email that will direct you to the recording. And also check out our webinars on industryweek.com on our webinar section for future events. We want to thank everyone for their attendance, and have a good day.